Well, sometimes it's just not your day, and Sunday was one of those for the Coventry Bears as they lost 44-12 at home to Whitehaven. Not to worry though, we've got all the reaction and we'll look ahead to this weekend's trip to Odsall to play the mighty Bradford Bulls. This is the world's greatest podcast about the Coventry Bears. This is Bear Necessities. Welcome to Bear Necessities. We're sponsored by the Bears Vice Presidents. We live at covbearspodcast.com. We're at covbearspodcast on Twitter, and you can find us in Apple Podcasts, on YouTube, and generally anywhere else you get your podcasts from. I'm one of your hosts, Dave Musson, and joining me to my virtual left is my co-pilot and former Bears fullback, Craig Cathcart. Craig, how are you?
Yes, I'm good, mate. I'm good. Unfortunately, missed the game on Sunday due to family commitments, but although it sounds like the Bears put in a really decent performance at times, it was probably one of the better ones to miss. So
yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Well, we'll get to the game in a little bit, but as always, we've got plenty to get through in this show. So we will pick over Sunday's game against Whitehaven, including hearing the post-match thoughts from Bears head coach Tom Sang. We've also got a couple more of your AskMrC questions, and we'll look ahead to that trip to play in Bradford this weekend. But first, we've got a few bits of news to rattle through. So, in no particular order, last week, the Bears announced details of the Sky Tri Bears Juniors, which will be running every Friday starting the 20th of April until the 27th of July. Training is for under 7s, 8s and 9s, which is school years 2, 3 and 4, and takes place at 6:30 at the Odsall Leisure Centre. The first session is free, and then it's £40 for full season. If you want more details, there's more info on the Bears website, and you can also email debbie.watson@coventrybears.co.uk. And there are also plans to announce details for other age groups soon. So from kids to big kids, Tri-Tag Rugby is officially launching in Coventry later this month, with Bears CEO Alan Robinson and Bears community coach Troy Perkins both involved in running it. So there's going to be a men's league at Coventry Rugby Club on Wednesdays and a mixed league at the Odsall Centre on Thursdays. Now the leagues start on the 9th and 10th of May, but there are free taster sessions on the 25th and 26th of April. You can either register an entire team, or you can just come forward as an individual or a group, and if you do that, then Tri-Tag Rugby will put you into a team. It all looks really good fun, and even better, anyone who registers gets a pair of Bears tickets as well. So if you want more info on that, you can go to trytagrugby.com, or you can look at our Twitter timeline as we've retweeted the link out for it. And Craig, you and I were talking before we pushed record. We're both pretty keen on that. There might well be a Bear Necessities / Bears Old Boys team going into that at some point, mightn't there?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. The boots are going to have to get dusted off, and there's a very thick layer of dust on them now, believe me. So, yeah, I think a bit of fitness might be required as well, but I have to say, having watched a lot of the rugby league over the last recent years, it's got me itching to play again. But obviously, my battered old body wouldn't be able to cope with contact. So, touch rugby sounds brilliant, and a competitive or semi-competitive sort of league structure sounds good to me. It sounds like it could be really, really good fun.
Definitely does. Just a few more bits of news. So we all know that the Bears have been drawn against Widnes Vikings away in the 5th round of the Challenge Cup. Since our last full episode, the match details have been confirmed. So it's 1 p.m. kickoff at the Holton Stadium on Saturday, 21st of April. And the newly formed Bears supporters group is booking a coach for travel up to that game. For more details on that, either go to the Bears website or go and listen to the bonus mini episode of this very podcast that came out last week, available in all the usual places and has lots of info in there for you. One thing we should add about Widnes tickets that wasn't included in the bonus episodes. So when you're booking your match ticket from the Widnes Vikings website, which is how you have to do it, they're asking you to use the code CC5WIDCO. That's CC5WIDCO, so that Widnes know that you're a Bears fan. And they'll try and sit all of us together. And one more bit of news related to that Widnes game, in fact. Those of you paying attention will have heard me mention on a previous show that we're working on something special for a future episode. Well, I think the time has come to reveal more. So next week, you'll get your regular episode after the Bradford game, obviously. But as a special treat, we're pulling together a bonus episode dedicated entirely to previewing the trip to Widnes. And trust me, it's going to be a really good one. So on that show, Craig and I are going to count down 5 quick facts about both the Bears and the Vikings to give you a bit of a trivia fix. We're going to hear from club president Ron Banks about the last time the Bears played at the Holton Stadium. And we'll hear from the one man in the current Bears squad who knows what it's like to play and score against Widnes in a Challenge Cup match. That's Ben Stead, the man who doesn't miss. And, as if all that wasn't enough, we've also been very fortunate to chat to Widnes legend Kurt Sorensen, who not only captained the Vikings to their World Club Championship in 1989, but he was also a coach to a once young man called James Gertens. So we reunited those two chaps, especially for our podcast, and you can hear exactly what they had to say on the Widnes preview show, which will all come out next week. Craig, it's all very exciting pulling together this special show, isn't it?
Yeah, it's absolutely fantastic. Still can't believe you managed to interview Kurt Sorensen. That's just absolutely massive. And yeah, it's just been a very exciting, couple of weeks trying to, pulling together all these interviews and hearing who you've managed to speak to. It's just absolutely brilliant. Going to be a cracking episode, that one.
Yes, very much looking forward to it. Okay, that's enough plugging. We should probably get on to talking about Sunday's 44-12 defeat at home to Whitehaven. So we'll hear from Bears coach Tom Sang very shortly, but first I'll quickly round up the story of the match. So Bears actually started really well. Paul Emanuele nailed a 40-20 early on and they looked a threat. However, the visitors scored in the 6th minute when they found a hole in the Bears' defence. It was a shame, and to be honest, it was kind of against the run of play. The next 15 minutes were full of Bears pressure and territory, but they just couldn't make it pay, and it proved costly on 20 minutes when Haven scored again after a grubber to the corner. Credit to the Bears though, they continued to press, they forced plenty of Haven errors, and they almost scored when Lewis Lord, who was making his return from injury, was just held up. However, Haven crucially scored again right before the half-time hooter. He just slipped a simple inside pass for an easy run-in. So the score at the break was 18-0 to the visitors, and it was a score that was a pretty harsh reflection of the game, to be honest. Bears came out brightly in the second period, and they did strike first. Harry Chapman took a long pass brilliantly and scored in the corner, and Emanuele converted. But any hopes of them winning the second half, as they did against Newcastle, were kind of extinguished with a devastating 10 minutes from Whitehaven, where everything seemed to pay off for them, and they just scored 4 tries back-to-back to take their lead out to 38-6. Bears did score again with 12 minutes to go. Harry Chapman again with a try. He intercepted a pass 10 metres out from the Bears line and just ran the length of the field to score. But Whitehaven still had time for another to make that final score of Bears 12, Whitehaven 44. So we'll chat more about the game in a moment, but first, here's what Bears head coach Tom Sang had to say after the game. Well, Tom, bit of a tough day in the office, that one, really. I mean, there's no doubting the commitment to your players and the effort they were putting in, but ultimately Whitehaven just seemed too strong. Do you think that's a fair reflection of the game, that it was simply a case of coming up against a better team?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's no two ways about it. Whitehaven were they're a quality side. They're a real big pack. And I think one of the things that we said in the week was, from what we'd seen in Whitehaven, that they're one of the type of team that, regardless of what's happened in the game, good or bad, they'll just keep doing the same thing over and over and over and over, consistent and relentless. And so we need to be at our best to be able to match them in the first place, and then once we match them, to then keep going with them. And I think that was the case. I thought in the first 40 minutes we matched them, and I think really we didn't deserve to be down 18-0 at half time. For me, it was a 50-50 half. Like we both sides were pretty even. But in the second half, like I said, they stayed at the level they were playing at, and we just really dropped off with a bit of fatigue. A few penalties went against us. We lost a bit of momentum in the game, and then after the first try went in, we made an error, gave away a penalty, and then that just sort of, there was a bit of a probably a 10-minute spell there where they just ran in a few, and it was the periods of the game that we need to be mindful of, because teams will always have sort of switches in momentum in a game. It's how well you can defend when you don't have the ball and you don't have momentum on your side. So yeah, it was just the case of they stayed consistent and played at a certain high level. We matched them for long periods, but we just weren't able to keep up with them for the full 80. Saying that, we knew it was going to be tough. We're without 6, probably, well, arguably 7, without Chris Barrett first choice players. So a lot of changes from last week, which is a disruptive in itself. But the fact that those players are very influential as well, missing that. Our first choice halfback, 2 first choice wingers, 2 first choice back rowers, 2 first team props. It's you're talking like real impactful players that can really make a difference. So considering that, the flip side of it is I'm actually really happy that we did stick with them for long periods, and that the guys that came in really made a good account of themselves and really pushed really hard, and have given me a few sort of questions about what the guys that are returning, do they come straight back in or not. So there's a lot of decisions that we need to make this week. So yeah, it's a tough one. It's probably the most frustrated I've been this year, because I felt for long stretches, like I said, we did match them, and on a different day with those other players available, you don't know, it might have been a different result.
Yeah, I mean that first half in particular, I'd agree with you about it being a much closer contest than the scoreline suggested. It felt to me watching as if the Bears had a lot of good possession and did a lot of good things with it, and perhaps just didn't. A mixture of didn't get the rub of the green on the Haven try line, and perhaps not quite as much guile as they might have needed. Do you think that's fair? Do you think it's a case of just being a bit more clinical when you're close to the line?
I think that's you're absolutely spot on, and I think that is one of the offshoots of having all those different players change out unavailable. So you bring in a lot of different players who they've all trained regularly and together, but if you've got slightly different combinations, your timing is just slightly wrong, or you're just slightly out, or you've got a slightly different voice telling you to get to somewhere slightly differently to what you're used to. All those little things have a big impact, and the effort level was there, and that's what gave us the field position. Defensively, we were very good for long patches in that first half, but it's the change of combinations, the change of personnel that just mean that we weren't quite as creative as we should have been. Taking nothing away from Liam, who played in the halves for us, I thought he had a solid game. But you put Ben Stead in that position with that amount of field position and possession, and we at least scored 2 or 3 tries and matched them at half time. So.
One big positive today was Lewis Lord back on the pitch after his broken bone in his foot. How do you think he did in his first game back? Yeah,
it was good. He needs to work on his match fitness, but I think when he came on, him and Zach are good foils for each other. Zach's very is very much a defence orientated player, and he's learning the attacking side of the game, and he starts us off well in games. And Lewis has just that little bit more spark in terms of he's more of a running 9. He wants to get out of the ruck and go forward, and he wants to bring players with him. So those two really complement each other, and I think they're a good combination. We've also then got Richie Hughes, who was 18th man today, who has been our captain in the past and is a very good 9. So we've got some real quality players in that position. So Lewis, it's good to have him back, and it just brings us something different in that position.
Yeah. And just talking injuries, I know noticed Joel Thomas went off in the first half, and I know he came back on the pitch. Was it just a knock that he's been able to run off, or is he a doubt for next week?
We need to assess him. I think he should be okay, or he should be available to play. It was a bang onto the side of the knee. I think it was more of an impact rather than any sort of twist or anything sort of torn or anything, but we'll see through the week.
And looking on to next week, obviously it's one of the standout ties of the fixture list. It's a trip up to Odsall to play Bradford, historic team, historic stadium. They're going to be up for it, because I don't know if you've seen they lost by a point today, so perhaps not the best time to be going to meet them. But how do you prepare your players for that game and make sure that they're not getting too caught up in the occasion and the name?
Well, I think when you're playing a team like that, where there's such a disparity in terms of the funding that they have and the history that they have, and the fact that they're a full-time team, the full-time athletes, there's a danger that you go in awe of them. And I think the main thing is that we go in with no fear and with no sort of nerves or anything like that will hold us back. I'm going to tell the lads that they just need to play and enjoy the day, enjoy the game, and just you need to work hard to try and swing some momentum to your favour, and slow and try and speed the game up to help you do that. And then there's little tricks that you can do to try and slow the game down at the same time. So we'll be doing what we can do to be creative on that side of things. We've got a little bit of experience of playing a team that's sort of on paper so far ahead when we played Toronto last year, and we did some things slightly differently that kept us in that game. So we might employ some of those tactics, but I think the main thing is that we just go there to play, to enjoy the game, and just to work really, really hard.
And just lastly, obviously next week as well, it's a chance for you to pit your coaching wits against John Keir, one of the most respected coaches in the game. Two parts really. Are you looking forward to that? And secondly, after the game, obviously he's a man who knows a thing or two about causing a cup upset. Are you going to be picking his brains with Widnes, with a trip to Widnes on the horizon week after?
Yeah, no, I'll have a chat with him. I loosely know John from my old job working for the RFL, so I'll definitely be having a chat with him and see if he's got any tips and go from there. But it's exciting for the club to be playing for Bradford Bulls. Who would have thought that 4 years ago, or even 12 months ago? And then obviously personally to be able to coach against such a big name and a legend in the sport, really, it's certainly a milestone for me personally. So same with the players. I'll go there and I'll enjoy the occasion, and we'll see what happens.
Thanks as always for your time, Tom.
No, you're welcome.
So thanks as always to Tom for his time after the game. It's much appreciated. So Craig, you mentioned at the start you weren't able to make it to the game for this one. So we're reversing roles a little bit here.
Yeah.
So I guess what do you want to know from Sunday? And I'll try and cover it.
Well, I think, I was following it on Twitter, and it sounds like the Bears actually competed really well in the first half. I was I have to say, a bit concerned ahead of the game due to the number of absences in the Bears lineup. While I think we've got a much stronger squad this year, I did think they would probably miss one or two of the more sort of influential players in the lineup. So, I guess how competitive were the Bears in the first half? Was it more that Whitehaven were just more clinical and professional, and or how did it actually go?
Well, as I said in the roundup, and also I think as Tom hinted in his post match, that first half scoreline was pretty harsh. And you're right, the Bears were very competitive. They had a lot of territory. If you were looking at it in terms of possession and territory, Bears were well on top in that half. And yeah, a little bit of Whitehaven being a bit more clinical. The tries in the first half were a little soft on the Bears' point of view. And also on the flip side, just I think as Tom mentioned in his post-match interview, just that slight difference of having players in who have not been regular starters this year, it just slightly delays the moves a little bit, slightly unsure in terms of where people are needing to stand and things, and it just lacked that cutting edge. And you're right, the Bears were missing a lot of players. If you look at the list of players who were not available on Sunday, you've got Benstead, you've got Errol Carter, you've got Malachy, got Kieran Sherratt, you've got Dan Gover, you've got Jammer and Chris Barrett. If those guys had all been on the pitch, that would definitely have made a difference, because there were a lot of opportunities, particularly in that first half for the Bears to score. And that's not to say the players who stepped up didn't do well. They did. But it was perhaps telling, aside from the combinations not quite being as slick as they normally are, that there was perhaps a little bit less fitness than some of those more regular starters as well.
Yeah.
But credit to the Bears, they didn't back down at all. Even in the second half, when there was that 10 minutes when Haven just scored back to back. The Bears of last season, Haven would probably have gone past 50, if not 60 points in that. And I know conceding 44 points is not ideal, but it's very fair to say that the Bears stayed competitive all game, and that's the kind of thing that Tom was promising pre-season as well. And another thing worth noting, the Bears did give Whitehaven a good game for a half and were competitive at times in the second half. That backline on Sunday, you take Paul Emanuele out of that backline and everyone else was 21 or under. So if the Bears can keep that backline together, that's a pretty good looking backline for the future.
I wasn't too disheartened by the scoreline. Whitehaven nearly got promoted last year. They missed out in the playoff final by 2 points. So we know that they're a really good team. We know that they're going to be up there at the end of the season. It would have been. We'll never know if we'd had all the players available what the final score would have been. Whitehaven possibly would have still won, but what we do have is players coming in who've put in a really good shift and got experience playing, and it's going to be another tough game next week, but the players will have learned from that experience and moved on. And I mean, in terms of performances, any standout performers?
I think Paul Emanuele definitely stepped up and took on a bit more of a leadership role, which I guess he kind of had to do with that backline. He was really organising the troops well. His kicking was good, and just little things like how frustrated he was getting if he missed a tackle or if something didn't come off. I think that was good to see him really step up. I have to mention Harry Chapman for taking his tries so well, and he was playing on the wing as well, which is not a position we've necessarily seen him in that often.
Yeah.
He took both his tries really well, especially the interception where he had the length of the field to go. Really impressive. Joel Thomas again made a massive impact coming off the bench. He did have to go off for a bit with an injury, but he did come back on, so hopefully it's not too serious an injury. It's good to see Lewis Lord back as well, but he's perhaps missing a bit of match fitness, but he definitely gave the Bears a bit of added impetus going forward. Just trying to think if there was anybody else who really caught my eye. I think James Mason looked solid again on that right edge. He's one of those players who sort of goes under the radar until you sort of concentrate and realise that he's playing. But he was making yardage again. He wasn't able to repeat his try scoring feats of the last couple of games, but again he looked solid. Kind of a lot of the usual suspects really. I think Harry Kaufman was one of the players who came in. He came in and put in a good shift. Alex Beddoes was effective at times. He did knock on a couple of times as well, but that sort of thing happens. So I think they would be the standout ones really. I mean, what was really pleasing overall was that they, you can have that many players come in and the team still looked like the team we've been watching all season. They still looked like a squad that was together. They still looked like they cared, and they were clearly sticking to the systems that the coaches were trying to get them to implement, and they kept at it. So
I mean, that's a really positive sign. I mean, one thing, I watched the post-match interview with the Carl Foster, the Whitehaven coach. Mm-hmm. It was really apparent from seeing that they really took the Bears seriously and were well prepared for the game and didn't by any means think it was going to be a walkover. And I think that shows sort of the progress the Bears have made, that they're coming, they're not thinking they're going to have an easy day coming down to play the Bears. No. The other thing as well, he said that he felt that the Bears were a very good kicking team, which is a very good compliment, I think. But obviously the Bears were missing Ben Stead, which again, with Ben in the lineup might have made a difference. But from what I gather, Paul played really well in that role. So it's I think there's positives to take out of it. Move on and move on to the next game, and the guys have just got to be confident in their own ability. We've got Bradford coming up, and hopefully a bit more up to full strength, and who knows what will happen there.
Yeah, exactly that. Well, as you say, Bradford are coming up, and we'll look ahead to this weekend's trip to Odsall later on in this show. But first, I think it's time to ask Mr. C. Okay, this is Ask Mr. C. It's the part of the show where I put your questions to my co-host, and it's sponsored by York's Tim, for which we are very grateful. If you've got something you'd like to ask Craig on a future episode, then don't be shy. Email us a question using the contact form at covbearspodcast.com, or tweet it to @covbearspodcast using the hashtag AskMrC. So Craig, we've got 2 questions for you this week. First question comes from Michael Shires, who wants to know, would you rather score a match-winning try, make a match-saving tackle, or land a match-winning drop goal?
Yeah, I saw that. I had to actually think about that question. Now, I played fullback, so I guess I've got to go with the match-saving tackle. I mean, I used to get as much pleasure out of when someone broke the line and thought they were through and just about to score, being able to catch them and you know, Jason Bass style, like he did in that Pilkington game.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that is a fullback's job, and it's when you can pull something off like that, the rest of the team really, really appreciate it. So, as much as it's nice to get the glory and get the match-winning tries or drop goals, well, I don't think I ever had the skill to do a decent drop goal, but. Yeah, a match-saving tackle, I think, is the one that every fullback wants to do.
Okay, nice. Team glory over personal glory. I like it.
Yeah.
And second this week, it's from our sponsor York's Tim, and he simply asks, how would you fancy going to Denver for the England-New Zealand test, assuming it actually happens, of course?
Well, I think the way that question was worded, it looked like Tim was making an offer. So. If Tim wants to pay for my trip, I'll be more than willing to go. But since he already sponsors the show, I'm not sure that. I think that's probably a bit of a cheeky request.
It's going above and beyond a bit in terms of sponsoring.
But yeah, I think it will be a fantastic occasion. I would love to be there. I'm not an England fan, it has to be said, but I am a fan of International Rugby League, and I think this test is unique. It's a wonderful opportunity for rugby league to gain some traction in America ahead of the World Cup in 2025, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Ahead of that World Cup, from what I gather, actually, despite all the negativity surrounding the fixture, it looks likely to be one that's going to be going for the next 3 years. I think the Americans will love rugby league. You know, it is a sport that's tailor-made for American viewing. The Canadians already in Toronto love the game. Mm-hmm. You know, the Wolfpack has been a great success so far. There's already talk about a team in New York setting up for next year, and other potential teams in the US. You know, I think it's going to be a great experience. I've actually played rugby league in the US.
Yes, of course, yeah. Coventry
University to Boston to play the Boston Storm many years ago. Well, it's around about 20 years ago now. Mm-hmm. And, you know, that was a wonderful experience. And there's a lot of very passionate people in America who want to get rugby league off the ground. There's been people who've been, you know, tirelessly working for the last 20 years to make that happen. Yeah. You know, they've got a World Cup. They got rewarded for their efforts by getting a World Cup going there. This game's a great opportunity. I have to say, some of the negativity, which really has been caused by the behaviour of the NRL, is really, really disappointing for me. Mm. I think, you know, making it appear that the game might not go ahead is a real blow. But you know, it's going to be. I think it'll probably sell quite well. It would be worrying if it was a complete disaster, but from what I gather, there's already a number of tickets sold. So, despite the negativity, it looks like it hopefully will be a success.
Yeah, and you've got to love the way the Americans are marketing it as well.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've seen the posters, but it's all like 6 downs, no pads. It's really sort of tapping into that NFL crowd as well. So
yeah, it's a tailor-made sport for America. I mean, the whole NRL thing as well. I mean, there's supposedly Australia is going to play Tonga in an international in Qatar. Mm-hmm. Now, the NRL said the reason that they didn't want to release players for the Denver game was because they were worried about altitude and heat and everything else, and they didn't think it was safe for players to play there.
Yeah.
Now, if Denver's not safe for players, then I don't know how Qatar is safe with the heat there is safe for players to play in. So it strikes me as being a bit of a power struggle. Again, we've seen it time and time again in rugby league. But if we want to make rugby league a success globally, then there has to be an international game, and we have to be playing fixtures abroad like the American game, and trying to spread and grow the game.
And I think anyone out there listening to this who wants another interesting rugby league podcast to listen to, check out this week's BBC Rugby League podcast, because Dave Woods, who was a guest on this show, of course, a few months ago, he does a really interesting interview with one of the guys involved with the Rugby League International Federation, or whatever they're called. Really insightful chat about what's going on in America, looking ahead to the World Cup. And this guy was also involved in the Football World Cup in 1994. So if you want a bit more background on that as to what's going on, then I can highly recommend the BBC Rugby League podcast. I can recommend it as a weekly show anyway, because it's very, very good. But this week's one is particularly useful. So that's it for this week's Ask Mr. C questions. Don't forget, if you've got something you'd like to ask Craig on a future episode, email us a question using the contact form at covbearspodcast.com, or tweet it to @covbearspodcast using hashtag AskMrC. And thanks as ever to York's Tim for sponsoring this section. Okay, we're almost done, but not before we look ahead to this Sunday's match, which sees the Bears travel to Odsall to take on the Bradford Bulls. Yes, really, the Bears playing the Bradford Bulls. So let's be realistic. Almost everyone involved is expecting the Bulls to win. They're full-time, they're the big-name club with the more established players and all of that stuff. So I think, Craig, we should just put that to one side. Let's focus on the fact that this is the Bears facing the Bulls, who were world champions only a few years ago. It's the Bears playing at Odsall, one of the most famous grounds in the history of the sport, and it's the Bears playing the Bulls on an equal footing in the same league. It's pretty exciting, isn't it?
It's absolutely bonkers. I think I said to someone during the week that in the next 2 weekends, the Bears are playing Bradford Bulls and Widnes Vikings. And I would have never in a million years have thought I'd be saying that 20 years ago. It's an unbelievable achievement for the Bears to have these types of games. Again, going back to where the Bears started out from. And, it's just amazing. I mean, in the first season that the Bears had, we got invited to play at Welford Road for I don't know if you remember when the Super League did on the road games, and they played in different places around the country. They played a game at Welford Road, and it was Bradford Bulls against London Broncos, and we played a warm-up game ahead of it. As we were coming off the pitch, the two teams were waiting to come out, and the Bradford Bulls team, which was packed full of stars back then, was just waiting in the tunnel as we walked in. It was just, we were all completely in awe. So let's face it, it's not the same star-studded Bradford team anymore, but it is still Bradford Bulls, that team with all that history and all those championships and everything else behind it. It's going to be a crazy day, really. And Odsall, as you say, is such a historic ground. It's iconic, it's unique, and I'm really looking forward to it. I've never actually been to Odsall, so to go there and watch the Bears play Bradford is just going to be amazing.
All that being said, we probably could have done without Workington beating the Bulls last weekend, couldn't we? Because we don't. One thing you don't want is Bradford Bulls looking to get themselves back on track. So that could go against the Bears, I do fear. But kickoff of the game is this Sunday at 2 p.m. If you're off to Odsall, then do make sure you say hi to Craig and do have a wonderful time. If you're not, then don't forget that the Bulls stream their games on their Facebook page, so you can check that out and you can cheer the Bears on from home. That's what I'm going to be doing because I unfortunately can't make it this weekend. But other than that, I think we're done for another episode. So do check out covbearspodcast.com for all our previous episodes and our links to our Twitter page, our YouTube channel, and shortcuts to our pages in Apple Podcasts and Stitcher. Craig, a pleasure as always. And
yes,
I will see you on the bus to Widnes, but I'll speak to you before then to have fun at Odsall. And who knows?
Yeah, very much looking forward to it. Hoping for a good result for the Bears.
Yeah, you never know. Stranger things have happened.